So today I'm going to talk about Asia. I'm based in Asia and we've grown our business internationally and have had very, very strong growth in Asia. So I've been told not to give you a sales pitch, but it'd be rude for me not to tell you a little bit about 90 Seconds. So as mentioned prior, we are a cloud video creation platform. And what that means is that we've built a piece of proprietary software that enables us to work with a marketplace of professional creators around the world in a seamless workflow and asset management tool that allows brands to shoot videos and content anywhere in the world. So we've had pretty strong growth. We're founded in New Zealand, hence the strange accent. And we've been running around New Zealand and the UK, and we've actually built a Japanese office, a Singaporean office, an Australian office, and both sides of the States in the last 3 years as well. So pretty busy. I guess our claim to fame, last year we managed to get Sequoia Capital on in our Series A round, so that was a bit of a coup, being one of the first Australasian companies to do so. So far we've done over 16,000 videos working with many creators and a number of brands across the world. So thanks for having me today. And today what I want to talk about is the Asian opportunity. But that's all good talking about the Asian opportunity. We know the populations, we know how big Asia is, and from a business perspective, coming out of New Zealand, obviously we're seeing the lights and numbers, we're seeing the opportunities, free trade agreements with China, all sorts of business with Japan and forestry and the agriculture sectors. But what I want to talk about is that opportunity mixed with the actual complexity of doing business in Asia, because it's not as easy as doing business with Australia, with America, with the UK that have also other challenges, but there's a lot more complexity when you are in Asia. So we can talk about the elephants in the room. Everyone knows China, India, Japan, and Korea. These are the ones when you start looking at Asia, you go, billion people, 1.2 billion people, high tech. And it's very easy to concentrate your business around how does my business or my product or my service or my technology appeal to China? How's it actually going to get penetration in India or Japan or Korea? We've had first-hand experience here. And it's still a little bit scared of China. China's the big unknown. There's so many moving parts. Same with India, same as Korea. We've actually got an office in Japan. We were lucky in our seed round. We got funding from a couple of Kiwi entrepreneurs who made a lot of money in Japan via 2 ventures that they actually listed first on European guys to list on the Japanese stock exchange. So they had access into Japan. So what we did is we set up via them, via networks, hired local team, and went in there basically as a 90 Seconds Japan operation. It's pretty hard to do that remotely from New Zealand. Obviously you've got language barriers and cultures and things. But that's a sort of spearhead for us into Japan before we went into ASEAN. So today I really don't want to focus on the Chinas, the Indias, the Japans and the Koreas. I want to focus in on ASEAN, which ASEAN was formed a few years back, and it's a makeup of 11 countries that you'll see there. The well-known ones, obviously the Singapores, the Malaysias, the Indonesias. More recently though, we've had Laos, Myanmar, Thailand and Brunei join to form this conglomerate, which is very, very interesting. You'll see here by some of the numbers, I mean, just in terms of the populations, yes, they're not China, they're not India in terms of the billions, but you're talking hundreds of millions of people. For us as a digital marketing content play within the space, I mean, the relevance of having the population age at a younger level, the average annual growth rate and the new middle class, that's really, really important when you're considering where your product could fit within these markets. But again, not looking at ASEAN as, okay, we're going to enter ASEAN. It's really looking at the individual countries and how your products make sense in each of those individual markets. I really like the fact that they're really investing in infrastructure across the board too. It's the basic infrastructure, the roading, the transport, the accommodation, all those things. But really, really where that money's going into is to fibre. It's to getting fast data to people in their countries and allowing them to be tech-focused, tech-first, launching tech platforms, becoming entrepreneurial, which is interesting. Brand New Zealand, we all know it, it's strong, clean, green, brand New Zealand. We now have pioneering tech companies such as Xero, for example, who is really flying the flag and saying, New Zealand, hey, we do have technology coming out of here. All of you sitting here right now are involved in some way, shape or form in technology in some facets, and I'm not sure how many people here are looking into getting their products or services or actually working in Asia right now, just as a show of hands. Not many? Should I stop now? Or? But leveraging brand New Zealand, I mean, we do have a strong brand throughout the world, and I think more and more as businesses like Xero, and I guess we'll put ourselves in that bucket now as well, we're really out there flying the flag of New Zealand is tech focused. We're a small company, we need to be tech first to actually win. And we're always export minded. We need to get our products and services and technology into larger markets to expand. We don't have a big enough domestic market for a lot of products, and especially technology, to actually manage it. So we are really, really focused on that. This is very interesting. At a point when I was doing my research 3 years ago, we were looking at setting up in terms of Southeast Asia. So when I looked at China and India and Korea and Japan with Tim and our investors, and really we're planning it out. I mean, it's interesting to see where to base yourself, which I'll talk about a little bit. And the Singapores, the Hong Kongs, the Jakartas, all those ones pop up first. But actually what we're seeing now, and I'm working with a number of companies, that a tier 2 country to me is a tier 2 country within ASEAN. That we're talking the Vietnams, the Cambodias, the Laos. These companies are really, really coming through now. We're seeing a massive focus from government in terms of getting fast data, the adoption of technology. The fun fact about them is they skip a tech generation. So for the likes of Thailand, where you go from, in our space anyway, TV advertising, you've now got digital advertising. So they've gone from TV right to mobile. They've skipped desktop, they've skipped laptops, they've skipped tablets. Now they're consuming all their data via mobile. So that's interesting when you're planning and looking at your products and technology. How actually relevant is it going to be if they then skip another generation of technology? Just make sure you're allowing for that in these markets that move so fast, and they've got so many people that when they move, there's a big shift in the whole paradigm of how people are actually interacting with that technology. The emerging middle class is interesting. I think there was a stat on the previous slide. There's going to be 200 million more middle class in ASEAN alone by 2030. I mean, these are the people that engage with your products, your services, your technology. These are the guys that you're targeting, and more of them are coming online daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, right up until, I mean, it's just going to be ongoing. The population growth of these countries is still increasing rapidly, as is the middle classes. That we've seen, obviously coming from New Zealand, you've seen that in China, and we've leveraged that as a country, but now also these other countries are catching up, the middle classes are coming online, and as per the last point, massive mobile penetration. We do a lot of work with Google out of Singapore for Southeast Asia, and looking at a country like Thailand, for example, where they're looking at YouTube penetration, looking at how they're sourcing their entertainment. And the stats that Google's giving us back are that in Thailand, you've got 2.5 hours per individual, that's 80 odd million people, sitting on their mobile device consuming data right now, per day, which is astonishing, and that's one market out of the 11. But those sort of stats really drive how you look at a tier 2 country and the positioning. So the one thing I wanted to point out by talking about this is not just thinking Asia as a country, as per my slide. Asia is made up of a huge amount of different countries, different cultures, everything. So start thinking about where your product fits and what you want to follow on to do that. That's all well and good. So that's the opportunities. And yes, it's bright and fuzzy and all sounds really good. But in terms of the complexity, there's no qualms about it. It's hard doing business in Asia. There's a lot of complexity, as you'll see by the points there. And I mean, the easiest ones are the communication around language. Yes, there are different languages. You look at Singapore, Hong Kong, business language English, a little bit easier to do business, but also the secondary languages still come in. You've still got the Chinese, you've still got Bahasa, you've still got all the other languages coming into it. But in terms of cultures, we've really found this in terms of creating content for brands across markets is you need to be culturally sensitive, you need to be culturally specific, and you need to localize your content. I think for our business anyway, this has actually played into one of our strengths, which is creating content in multiple locations, using localized creators who can speak the language, know the intricacies of the culture, and obviously being able to produce content that's relevant in that market. Gone are the days when we came into Asia, we've seen a lot of American and European businesses trying to create TVC content or creating TVC content, jamming it into digital channels in Asia, and just getting no penetration. They're trying to chop up big TVCs that they've spent millions of dollars on, trying to get more penetration. Doesn't work. You need local faces, local voices, and local cultural nuances involved in the content, specifically what we're doing. And you need to understand that. It's a very serious matter in terms of actually getting your products or services or technology actually penetrating the market. The infrastructure we've touched on already, but this is really key. I mean, for us, it's all good. The emerging tier 2 countries that we've talked about are one thing, but you've also got to be wary about the infrastructure, and that comes into how relevant your product or service or technology is. For us, for example, when we shoot a lot of content in, say, Myanmar or the Philippines, one thing that we have to consider is how long it's going to take them to upload the footage into our platform, how that affects the editing timelines. So actually being aware of the logistics, the infrastructure requirements, and the things that can hold you back in that process before you go in and do it, really crucial. In terms of a setup of a base, so it's really hard to run Asia from a remote country, whether it's New Zealand or you've got another office somewhere and you're trying to run it out of maybe Australia or the UK. We did this, and it was hard. I was spending 2 weeks in London and 2 weeks in Singapore for about 6 months setting up, and it's really hard to get on the ground and understand what you need to get done to set up. So what we did is actually, we made the move and made the investment, and I moved there full time, and then we start looking at structure. We've had ideas around setting up little mini bases in all of those 11 countries and in China and doing everything. But to be spread that thin is hard. It's hard on management, it's hard on time, it's hard to get productivity. And I think Mel's going to talk about that in terms of culture and performance and managing that later on. It's really hard to get your model when you're in a new sector or a new region to get that working. So we chose to set up a regional hub in Singapore, and we spoke out. So at the moment, I've got people flying in and out of Hong Kong, Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia on a week-a-month basis. And then once we get the penetration in those markets, that's when we set up beachhead offices. So we've got a beachhead office now in Hong Kong that has a full-time person, and we'll ramp that up as it goes. Really look at your product or service of where it's going to fit, because as we talked about, it might be a Vietnam, it might be a Thailand, it might be a country where you're going to get instant penetration, get more penetration, and actually make more money faster, and then you can use that as a stepping stone into one of the big elephants later on. In the lower cost markets, you've potentially got some government legislation potential, you might have to JV, you might have to do all sorts of things, so just be aware of those. I know Malaysia's quite a tricky one, Indonesia's quite a tricky one as well. But in terms of that, leverage, you can really leverage the government. So the second meeting we ever had when we were looking in between Hong Kong and Singapore to set up our regional office was with the EDB, the Economic Development Board of Singapore, presented our business plan, got them to understand what we were trying to do from a technology perspective, and really they engaged with us because, one, they want to create jobs. They want to create jobs in technology. They want to have you there as a regional base, bringing money back into the regional base from the region. So that's interesting. I mean, they do things like, if we hit our certain threshold of business plan in 3 years, we'll start looking at the tax rates we pay and things. So very forward thinking, specifically in Singapore. The government's been very, very helpful in setting up there, and we've actually been able to leverage that really well. You do have to watch out though, and this comes up occasionally in some of the countries where if the government's backed a local technology company and you're coming in to compete with it, then there can get a little bit of government assistance can be quite tricky in those regards. So just watch out for that as well. Do your comparisons, do your competitor analysis, and just understand exactly where you fit in that level. The Uber example in China is interesting. You can't just come into China and try and buy your way in. That didn't work, obviously, everyone knows the story. So money doesn't buy you traction, especially when you're going up against the government. So just be very, very cautious in terms of that. So just to finish off, I want to talk about a few major areas and things that just to consider if you're looking at expanding into Asia. So don't expect that just because the opportunity is so large, the population numbers are ridiculous, the growth rates are crazy, that you're going to get hockey stick growth straight away. It does take time. It does take relevance in market. It does take experience in market. I mean, our Japanese office, for example, It's taken 3 years really for us to get the sustainability in terms of how people think of 90 seconds. We're not a fly-by-night Japanese company. We're now headquartered for Japan, out of Tokyo. We've been here for 3 years. We've worked with these brands. Really does take a bit of time, more so. Singapore's grown really fast for us, but again, the hockey stick growth is what we always wanted. The hockey stick growth in technology is built off your product, ensuring that your product market fit is right and at the right time. So you've got to time it right as well. You need to localize, and I can't stress this enough, that's why I've written it 3 times. Localize, localize, localize. Faces, languages, cultural considerations, all of the above. When you're looking at these markets, understand how you're relevant for them, and then localize accordingly. Try not to launch remotely. And then the copycat organisations is an interesting one. I mean, I asked Rod Drury at a recent event in Singapore about Intuit in the States. Intuit's a big competitor in the States of Xero, big incumbent. They've got a lot of money, a lot of backing, and the market share in the States. And I said to Rod, well, why would you even go after the States market if you've got international penetration around them? They're not looking at expansion internationally. And he said, well, the best thing that they've done is being able to leverage off the fact that Intuit now talks about them as a competitor. He said it's the best marketing. You can't even buy that marketing when your competitors are talking about the people coming into the market. So it's one thing at 90 seconds that we don't do. We've got a number of organisations now that are trying to leverage off the work we've done in certain markets and do different things. But if you're looking backwards at those guys, not focusing on what you're trying to achieve in the market, I mean, for us, the market size for what we do is ginormous. So even if we had 2% or 1% of the global marketplace of content creation, we're happy days. We're a billions of dollars of company. So just be cautious of that. Try not to focus on the results straight away, but try and get product fit first, because if you focus on the results, you don't get them straight away, you probably won't invest enough, you won't invest the assets, the time, the people to actually be successful. So just that's a key point. And it always takes longer to launch successfully than you wanted. I mean, we're about to launch a brand new platform ourselves. It's taken longer than expected. When we've gone and opened new markets, it's always taken slightly longer than expected, depending on a few factors and how you're willing to commit to it. If you are looking at Asia as your first overseas market, though, be very calculated in how you do your forecasting, deploy your assets, deploy your monetary assets around how much you're willing to invest in that. So just to leave you with a few key points to consider. So I think I've talked about this enough, but make sure it fits into Asia, and Asia being the individual countries rather than Asia. Asia is not a country. There's been a number of cases even in the last 6 to 12 months in Singapore where large American and European companies have come to Singapore and started Asia and had these big growth expectations. They've invested hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars into setting up big office spaces with the big shiny things. They haven't actually done the product market fit properly though, so they end up not getting the growth rates. They end up having to report that back to HQ. It's not getting what it needs, and HQ retrenches them back because they're just a cost centre and a very large one at that point. So be very, very cautious in what you're doing. And make sure you're relevant. That's really key. Why are you relevant to that country, that industry, that sector? And what are you bringing that's new to them? I mean, Asia is really, really strong at adopting new technology. We've found that over the last 3 to 4 years that we've been operating there. They're big adopters of technology. What you will find in Asia, and specifically Singapore, is that you can get in front of people easily. I mean, I've worked in the States and the UK and Australasia for 90 seconds, and Asia's definitely the place where you can get 20 meetings a week and go in and it sounds great, everything's all go, but then nothing happens off the back of it, or you have to keep chasing, or you get the contract and it falls over. So just be cautious in getting surrounded in your own hype and success in Asia too, because anyone can go get 25 meetings a week, but if at the end of the day the black and white is where the rubber hits the road, how much are you getting in, how are you performing, and how sustainable is your growth? Understanding what you actually want to achieve, like this sounds pretty simple, and as business owners and technologists and entrepreneurs, this is really the basics. What is success in Asia? If you're going to launch in Asia, have a really clear plan about what that looks like in Asia, and really specify that as part of the overall global plan for your business. Because a lot of people come into Asia, like I said, there might be a little bit of a hockey stick start, you get excited, you double down in Asia. Is that success though, or is that just because now you're operating in a market that is 100 times more than the market you were operating in previously? Or is that because of a time, you've got lucky on timing, something's happened, maybe a legislation has come in. So just be very, very understanding of what success looks like for your business. And then how much you're willing to put into it. I mean, from our perspective, we've always done it a certain way because we weren't funded until last year. So we'd go in and fly and get the revenue, and that would sort of underpin the first person. We'd go and set up, and then that person would bring in more revenue, and then we'd put some more people around them and then grow the bases out from there. Whether that's the right way to do things or not, I mean, that's the calculated way we had to do it so we didn't run out of money, and it was successful for us because you're effectively getting your on-ground product market testing fit. You understand that your product's either working or not, and be flexible. If your product's not working, understand why. Be flexible in terms of maybe adapting it from your New Zealand offering to an Asian offering. It might be slightly different due to all the points we've talked about before. So just understand how much time, assets, team, maybe you send out some of your guns over there to start it off, however you want to look at it. But overall, I think Asia's open for business. ASEAN's open for business. You can get results there. You need to be a lot more patient than you'd like to be. I'd love to have we've got 25 out of Singapore now. I'd love to have 60 already, but it just didn't happen that way. You've got to build sustainable growth in that regard. So take your time, be considered, and move surely when you're looking at opening or operating in Asia. Thank you.
Well done. Thanks. Thank you very much, Nick. Thank you very much indeed. Got a few questions here for you, courtesy of the audience. Entering a new market is always a learning experience. Give me 2 things that you would not repeat.
I wouldn't fly. Actually, we started the New Zealand 90 seconds back in the day, and then 3 months later started the UK 90 seconds, which I head up. I wouldn't start a business across the other side of the world in the wrong time zone, that's for sure.
Very good. We've just got about a minute or so before we have to move on. Would you employ locals overseas or Kiwis when you're setting up in the new markets?
Oh, you've got to employ locals, yeah. I mean, we find we need a mix with talent because some markets have certain skills that maybe there's nothing locally, so we need to employ internationally. So in our Singaporean team, I think we've got a mix. We're probably 65, 70% local and 30% expat. But around the world, it really differs. But I mean, Kiwis are great, obviously. I'm sitting here in front of a room of Kiwis, so I've got to say that. But we do, our work ethic and our knowledge and our go-hard attitude is definitely something to employ.
Nice, nice. And look, just finally, knowing what you know now, would you still launch to Asia first or last?
Well, Asia was last for us, so I'd still do that.
Last?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Asia's complex. You need money to launch in Asia, and the complexity's hard. So if you've got a small founding team or a small team and a limited amount of resource, be very cautious. Asia does take a little bit longer, costs a little bit more than you think, and business has done it slightly different there. So go in and get the knowledge by all means, but to do a fully fledged launch, I would probably launch in Australia or the UK maybe before, but yeah, just be cautious.
That's fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, Nick Erskine.
Thanks.